2025 has seen the release of multiple major superhero movies. Captain America Brave New World began Marvel's year of releases, in which they released 3 movies and 2 shows. On top of Captain America Brave New World, Marvel released the movies Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, as well as the 2 major shows they had of Ironheart and Daredevil Born Again. DC launched their new DCU with a movie and a show. They released Superman in theaters and Peacemaker on HBO Max. Despite the big release slot, 2025 is the worst year of superhero movies at the box office since 2011, being the first time in the last 14 years no superhero movie has grossed over $700 million. While many have made the claim that the struggling box office is due to so-called superhero fatigue, that may be true, but in all honesty, I think superhero fatigue is actually a symptom of bad writing. Now, a few of the projects that I mentioned actually have large fan bases, well, seemingly large fan bases that praise them. Notably, for DC, the most financially successful one, while still losing money in the end, Superman had a large swath of passionate fans behind it. And for Marvel, despite being the worst financial performer, Thunderbolts received a lot of praise from people online. But at the end of the day, that praise didn't translate to butts and seats at theaters. And in all honesty, I think that's because of the bad writing within it. But allow me to explain. So take your personal opinion out of this movie. I don't care how much fun you had or how it made you feel. Because I believe all 4 major films released have massive writing flaws within them that led to the general audience being scared away from them, thinking, well, it'll be on streaming soon anyway, I'll just watch it then, or I'll probably just skip this one. At the end of the day, the bad writing piling up over time has led to what is now called superhero fatigue. But in all honesty, it's likely more just bad movie fatigue. The box office as a whole has been struggling all year round because really there's not been that much good that's released. Sinners is a great movie that released, as well as F1, even Warfare. But at the end of the day, it's been far too inconsistent for fans to want to consistently go to the box office just to get met with a slop movie or a badly written movie. Captain America Brave New World was the first major superhero movie released this year. The movie shows the first of Sam Wilson, also known as Falcon, taking over for Steve Rogers' Captain America. This is a concept that was both tried and also failed in the comics in the past. However, this is a movie, so we're not talking about the comics or any of that going into it. At the end of the day, it failed in the comics, and I just always find it interesting whenever studios decide to take concepts that fail in comics and attempt to push them into movies. Now, it doesn't always have to be a failure by any means. I think notably a character like Miles Morales, who has no real interesting or compelling comic book storylines to speak of, was forced into the main character role of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and it was great. It's probably the best Miles Morales story you can get out there, and one of the few good ones. It actually made people care about the character of Miles Morales and not any of the other factors behind it. While it doesn't always fail, it tends to not exactly sow the seeds of success for a movie. But all that aside, that was just factors working against it coming in. It doesn't matter if this would have been the most popular comic character ever adapted to the screen, because at the end of the day, the movie was a complete mess. Based on reports, it seems they may have reshot this 2 or maybe even 3 different times, and then all of those reshoots were cut and compiled together, and some version of that Frankenstein's monster is what released on screens in February. The rushed and reshot nature of the film led to poor struggling VFX artists to try to turn something that was poorly shot, poorly written, and poorly made into something that was somewhat watchable. But that's just way too much to ask for one crew who's also working on basically every shot of your movie, because you need VFX in everything. And that always leads to all of the visual effects looking bad. And then on top of that, the editors have to try to compile something out of these hours of footage that you shot to try to get a compelling narrative across. But really, when you've done as much as they did to this movie, reshooting-wise, that was going to be a tall task no matter what. A lot of the main writing problems come down to the main character of Sam Wilson. Sam is a guy who's been shown to be extremely competent in the past in other movies as Falcon, and he makes a lot of weird and stupid decisions in this movie. I think the Celestial Island fight as a whole is, while looks cool and interesting, is really stupid when you think of the context of the story and what's actually happening. All of the plan that the leader has is one of the dumbest ever. There's so many different ways you can go into attacking the writing in this story, but I'm just naming what they are. I'd encourage you to actually look into it yourself, try to figure it out, because this isn't an in-depth look at every single movie. I'm mostly just the broad strokes of these movies and why they failed, and those are just some of the main writing issues that actually stick out to me when you watch this movie, on top of all that reshooting and all that compiling together. Makes it super confusing what's going on the screen and hard to follow. And then, writing aside, another reason that this is actually not going to perform well with the casual audience is it suffers from this new issue that has arisen with doing homework. which with all the Disney Plus releases and all the movies is not good because you have to catch up. This movie is a sequel to The Incredible Hulk from 2008, as well as the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show on Disney Plus, the movie Eternals, and even probably Avengers Endgame. All those, really the only thing that's not required for you to actually watch is the first 3 Captain America movies. They're pretty irrelevant in the grand scheme of this movie. And while it says homework, it wouldn't be a problem if it was good homework, if you enjoyed doing the homework, if the shows and movies were all made. But the Falcon and Winter Soldier is one of the worst written things Marvel's ever made, as well as Eternals just not being very popular. Avengers Endgame is a fun watch, but at the end of the day, very little of Avengers Endgame ties into this movie as a whole. 2008, The Incredible Hulk is a lot better than some of the garbage we have now, but it's still not that good in the grand scheme of the MCU. And I don't know why a movie from 2008 is directly tying into a movie in 2025, but this movie was used as a way to try to tie up a lot of loose ends, and I think that also really worked against it. So this trend of doing homework on shows and movies that are poorly written in and of itself leads to your general audience member being dreadfully confused by the product on the screen in front of them. The reshot and re-edited nature of this movie is perhaps most hilariously seen with Giancarlo Esposito's character. He randomly shows up and disappears at various points throughout the movie, and I'm like 90% certain that Anthony Mackie and Esposito were never even on set together. Like I said earlier, I'm not here to go deeply into detail on every single problem with the plot and all of the horrendous writing. There's lots of videos out there you can go watch that will do that in a much more detailed manner if you're interested. But trust me, there are a lot of them due to the poor writing and all those other factors added in. And that's where the bad writing comes in for this movie and harms your general audience member coming to see it, leading to them not wanting to come back or not bringing their families or not bringing their friends or telling people to go watch this movie. The main writing problem that I will look at, like I said earlier, is Sam Wilson. He has no real character development in this movie. Sam Wilson enters this movie believing he's a good person who deserves to be Captain America. Sam then has to deal with people questioning whether he's a good person who deserves to be Captain America. And then he proceeds to the movie in a normal nature because Sam has no questioning whether he is a good person who deserves to be Captain America or not. So he acts like a good person who deserves to be Captain America, which leads to those who questioned him to finally understand that he is in fact a good person who deserves to be Captain America. Now, I repeated myself to kind of make the point there of nothing actually changes with Sam as a character. He doesn't have to grow to realize he deserves to be Captain America or any of that. He always believed it, and it was the people around him who were at fault. That's a Mary Sue character, a term that's usually only been applied to female leads, right? Whether it's Star Wars, Marvel, whatever. But Mary Sue is just a way to describe that kind of character, and that's what Sam Wilson is in this movie, which is a shame because Sam Wilson's a great character in all the older MCU projects. So it really is a shame that they didn't do anything interesting with his character at all in this movie. To which the main argument would probably be, well, they have to deal with him not having the super soldier serum. Problem is, there is no change into whether or not he actually should take the super soldier serum. There's passing jokes that he should, or people telling him he should, but never once does he actually consider taking it. There's a joke at the end of the movie where he says, I should have taken the serum. That's not character growth. That is a character staying stagnant and everyone else around them needing to change to accept that he is that good person who deserves to be Captain America, and he doesn't need that serum. Not to mention, he's not even really like the character of Captain America at all, except that he wears red, white, and blue. He has a nanotech wingsuit that makes him more like Iron Man and Black Panther than Captain America. He doesn't even need the shield with what he does in all the movie. He kind of just has it because the movie's called Captain America. And then at the very end of the movie, using his Black Panther superpowers instead of his shield that he has, he still isn't even able to really defeat the main villain of Red Hulk. You know, Red Hulk was still angry and ready to kill him, and he has to kind of talk him down among the cherry blossoms in a very poorly visual effects, airy, green screened thing. And that's a consistent trend we'll see where the superhero doesn't actually take down the main villain at the end of the movie, which always feels a little less satisfying when you actually watch it. The next Marvel film that released is actually the one that performed financially the worst out of any superhero movie this year, yet seemingly received the highest praise from MCU fans. And that movie is, of course, Thunderbolts. While I think Thunderbolts failing was the probably least out of these four to do with bad writing, the script is still far from amazing or even really good. I think the main root of Thunderbolts' box office failure is due to that homework problem, like I mentioned earlier with Brave New World. All of the characters aren't exactly household popular names. Notably, Bucky Barnes is probably the most well-known character in the entire roster of Thunderbolts. But instead of even being like the leader of this group, he's more like a tertiary character. He doesn't play much of a part in this movie, so the main character people actually recognize recognize is pretty inconsequential in the grand scheme of how this movie is shot. You don't really get anything with him until a bit of the ways into the movie. Most of the main characters are actually from the Black Widow movie, which didn't exactly perform up to expectations. Now, some of that was due to COVID, some of that was due to things, but they were side characters in that movie. It's not Natasha Romanoff, it's Yelena and David Harbour's Red Guardian, who are the main characters in this film. Along with them is John Walker, a character who a lot of people like, but is very horribly mistreated, but is one of the main characters from the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, which also didn't perform great, as well as Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is a movie that released in the middle of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, which means that really no one remembers it, to be honest. And now I'm not saying there aren't people who remember it, but at the end of the day, it's a very inconsequential movie. It does set up stuff for Avengers Endgame, but let's be honest, that's no one's top tier MCU movie when they're thinking through them. Now, a lot of people praise this movie, and it probably did have my favorite superhero scene of the year. Still not a great scene that still had some writing problems, but it's probably my best scene of the year, where all the members of the Thunderbolts are actually saving citizens of New York. It's just good to see superheroes saving people. That's kind of something that's seemingly somehow been lost in superhero movies. We got it a bit in Superman, but Thunderbolts, I liked this scene the best, kind of the coming together of the team moment. But at the end of the day, when the characters are two different derivative Captain Americas, Red Guardian and John Walker, a Captain America side character in Bucky Barnes, who's also kind of like Captain America because the arm acting like a shield and vibranium, and people know him from Captain America. And in comics, I know this is a movie, not comics, but in the comics, he does become Captain America at one point. A derivative Black Widow character who's literally just Black Widow, but a different person. And then a misunderstood villain from a superhero movie from years ago. That's not exactly going to pull in a lot of audience members to want to come watch this movie. Not to mention, this was probably hurt by the earlier disaster we talked about of Captain America Brave New World, which was so bad that people were like, yeah, maybe it's time to not watch the next MCU movie. I don't care about these characters at all who are in this movie, and the last one sucked, so I'm just not going to watch this one. I think the positive word of mouth from MCU fans probably brought in a couple new viewers. At the end of the day, I don't know how impactful that is, because online, most MCU fans, when a new movie comes out, talk about how amazing and awesome and it's the most inspiring thing I've ever seen. So any of their like real life friends, if they were saying that, are probably like, yeah, you said this about the last 27. So I'm not sure how well it actually brought people in, but I do think if it did bring in general audience members, they watched it not knowing these characters, not caring, and just noticing the writing flaws. So they definitely didn't come back and definitely didn't recommend it. In fact, they may have actually pushed people away from wanting to see this movie. I was going to see Thunderbolts this weekend. I watched it. It's not that great. You know, that's a conversation I've had with my friends where I'm like, I watched the movie. If you want, it's all right, but I wouldn't recommend it. That may not convince a lot of people, but it's going to prevent this movie from getting over $400 million, which this movie failed to do, when you don't have that general audience member coming to get. You already have the MCU fans. Those are your core fans who are going to come watch your next thing no matter what. You need to get the general audience members in if you want this movie to be financially profitable. Now, like I said, I don't think the main cause of it was the writing. I do think the writing still played a big part. The first main problem I have with the writing, again, main character. The biggest issue this year in superhero movies was writing the main characters. And Yelena does not make much sense as a main character. First off, she should not have been the lead. It should have been Bucky, like earlier mentioned, just because he is your more popular character. But her journey in this movie makes pretty much no sense and wouldn't make someone who has never seen Yelena before like her in any way. Yelena's motivation to be a hero is due to her being bored of being a criminal or mercenary. That's it. Compare that directly to the character she's a derivative ripoff of, Natasha Romanoff, who has a singular line in Avengers that gives her more motivation, more likability, better hero qualities than anything Yelena has in all of this movie.
I got red in my ledger. I'd like to wipe it out.
Black Widow deciding to be a hero as a way to try to clear up her past, get the red out of her ledger, is her motivation for helping the Avengers. Yelena's motivation is nothing like that. It's very loosely connected to Natasha, but the main line at the start of the movie is that she's just bored of what she's doing and she wants to change things up, so she wants to be a hero. That is what the movie tells us. You can write the script for the movie all you want and say, well, no, because this happened. They don't tell you that in the movie. So that's not what happened. What happened is Yelena got bored of being a criminal or mercenary and decided she wanted to be a hero now, so that led to the whole events of this movie. It's a very uncompelling story character arc for a superhero to have when they don't have heroic qualities. She kind of develops into some at the end, but not much of one at all, really. So it's a very rough journey that isn't that interesting for a hero movie. Red Guardian has better character motivation, but it's still very loosely developed. Him wanting to be a better father is kind of his whole thing. But his motivation was a little bit better because he still wanted to try to be a real hero instead of just the Soviet puppet hero that he was for his whole career. And that was already a better character motivation than Yelena. John Walker could have been a very compelling character in this movie, tying it in with his PTSD or how he got one of his 5 medals of honor or whatever. Maybe it was 3, I don't remember, but how he got one of those or something like that with the whole void stuff. That would have been interesting. Instead, they just made him a deadbeat dad. But he's unfortunately consistently beat down by the scriptwriters, trying to convince you to not like him because, remember, he killed a terrorist in the Falcon Winter Soldier show. They really want you not to like him, but he's probably most people's favorite character from this movie. And I don't think he was that well written. I just think he had a chance to be the most well written out of them, and they didn't do anything with him. Ghost, who is like the most original in the sense of she's not a direct derivative of a different character already in the MCU, has a very unique set of powers that could have been interesting, but is extremely underutilized. In pretty much every scene, they were just like, oh well, guess they have that anti-ghost device up there. Can't do your superpower. Guess you're just a normal person now. And it's kind of like, what? That's not a very good way to... This is your most interesting character from a superpower standpoint. Maybe do something with that instead of having her be completely useless through most of the movie. The pacing is just all over the place with it. They spend like half the movie in a basement. I want to point that out. On top of all the contrivances in the basement. The anti-ghost device, the power supply is for some reason in the room with them, you know, so that they can get in and rip it out so that Ghost can do the ghost thing. There's a timer for some reason. They all show up at the same time. There's so many random contrivances in this one set alone. Not to mention, like I said, they spend half the movie in there. The pacing's all off. Those writing contrivances are all over. I already mentioned the anti-ghost device seemingly is all over the place. Completely underutilizing her power set. And then, similar to Brave New World, at the end, the heroes don't come together to fight the main villain. It all ends with them defeating Void via group hug. David Harbour and Lewis Pullman had some decent performances, but like I said, they were working with a pretty bad script at the time. This movie suffered a lot from not letting moments sit. That's a pretty consistent trend in Marvel and DC with James Gunn writing. There's moments in movies and they won't let them sit because they need to keep the audience laughing. They need to keep them having a good time. So that does exist in this movie as well. And I do think somewhere in here with these characters, with even these same plot elements, there's a good movie in there somewhere. I really do think there is. I think there's a very good movie in here somewhere. I just don't think it's what we got. And so it is no surprise to me that Thunderbolts was the biggest flop of the year for Marvel. The next superhero movie that came out was actually the biggest success of the year, was Superman. Now, while Superman was the biggest performing movie of the year, it was still drastically underperformed by what Superman should do at the box office. It didn't even reach $700 million. Superman should be a billion-dollar character, and this movie didn't even beat F1 in the theaters, all right? The most popular character in fiction at a point in time, maybe he's not anymore, but there was a point in time he definitely was, can't get $1 billion worldwide. Something is off with that. When you adjust for inflation, 2025 Superman is the worst performing Superman reboot or character launch ever. It's worse than Superman 78. It's worse than The Man of Steel. And somehow it even does worse than Superman Returns, a movie that horrifically underperformed when it released. The reason for this underperforming, in my opinion, is fully on the writing. It had good word of mouth from people. It was all over social media for a long time. It had that core audience member. They got it up to a decent bit. And I think it even brought in a lot of new eyes. That's how it got all the way up to 600 million. How do you get it to the $1 billion mark? People come back and watch it. And they didn't do that with Superman. Without a doubt in my mind, Superman is the highest praised superhero movie of the year. It's not even close. But if this exact same movie existed, same plot beats, same general concept, but it was a different director and it was a different character. Those are two important things, all right? Same exact movie. It's the exact same plot happens, but the character isn't Superman. It's someone with his exact same power set with a different name, and it was directed by anyone not named James Gunn. This movie would have been highly criticized by people. I have my own video explaining my in-depth opinion on Superman. You can go watch that if you want more of my detailed reasoning behind my thoughts on this movie. I've since soured even more on it since that video came out. But if you're truly looking to spend a lot of time and look at a very great video that breaks down the flaws with this writing, Little Platoon has a video where he did every single element of Superman. He literally just went through the plot one by one, ripped it to shreds. It is a very well-made video that really gets you to look at what the true flaws are in this movie. You can have fun with it all you want. You can enjoy it all you want. It's not a very well-written movie at the end of the day. So while the Gunn Bros and your general superhero fan might have loved this movie the first time they watched it, your general audience member probably had a similar thing with Thunderbolts. It's just a more popular character, right? They walked in and it felt like a sequel to about 30 other projects while not actually developing anything. And I'm not talking about people who love superheroes and they just hadn't seen a Superman movie. I'm talking about your general audience member who doesn't know the difference between Marvel and DC. That's a large majority of the population. All right, just to be clear. On top of that, James Gunn writing has gotten drastically worse. Check out my Peacemaker video to see the latest version of how bad the writing has gotten. And it's a consistent trend that his main character writing is pretty bad, as well as that same thing that we said with Thunderbolts, not letting moments sit. But the main character writing has been the thing I've notably watched fall off a cliff from James Gunn. And it's really disappointing because he has some of the best character stuff in the MCU with Guardians of the Galaxy. To paraphrase from Little Platoon's video, because like I said, it's a great video, he has the exact same character arc as Sam Wilson, essentially. This is Superman's character journey in this movie. Superman is a fun, energetic, and good person who wants to save people. Whereas Lex, who's given no real character motivation, for some reason doesn't believe Superman is a fun, energetic guy who wants to save people. So Lex sets out to prove Superman is in fact not a fun, energetic guy who wants to save people. In order to accomplish this, he releases the video of Superman's birth parents telling him to rule the world with an iron fist and kill anyone who gets in his way. However, despite this video being released, Superman personally never once questions that he's a fun, energetic person who wants to save people. And it's said that some people might question that he's a fun, energetic person who wants to save people. But then it's kind of revealed that most of those people who believe that are actually just monkeys typing mean tweets in Lex's pocket universe. So everyone in the real world, including the government, still believes Superman's a fun, energetic person who wants to save people, because otherwise they would be sending out mass units to capture Superman if they genuinely thought he was going to kill people and rule the world with an iron fist. They don't believe that because they just let him run free. And when the movie concludes, Superman doesn't have to change at all. He doesn't grow as a character or anything. He just still believes he's a fun, energetic, good person who needs to save people, but he also loves his Earth parents, which for some reason he, I guess, didn't before, even though they're the ones that raised him and he grew up with them and he seemingly loves them, but there's not a big moment until the ending that is a payoff that had no setup with a fun scene where he's watching videos when he was younger. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but that was his character journey. Everyone around him, well, not everyone, because pretty much no one changes, but the only people who do have to change are some of the characters around him who have to realize he's a fun, energetic, good person who wants to save people. Again, this is a Mary Sue character. That's what Superman was written as in this movie. But because this movie wasn't made by Marvel or Zack Snyder or J.J. Abrams, most people just choose not to notice it or choose not to criticize it. On top of all of that, the cinematography in this movie is terrible, which really isn't that much of a surprise considering it's the exact same cinematographer as the Flash movie, which also had nauseating cinematography in it. The flying looks terrible with the fisheye lens. It doesn't exactly feel like you're flying through the skies of Superman. As much as I think The Man of Steel is a very flawed movie that's not exactly well written, that scene where he takes off in his first flight is one of the coolest superhero moments in a movie. Every superhero film up till this one had a superhero moment in it. I don't really feel like there was a Superman moment in this movie. Superman Returns, the plane scene, right? Man of Steel, the flight scene. There's a moment in every big Superman movie. I can't tell you what this one is. The closest I would get is when he tries to hold the building, but can't hold the building despite being able to lift heavier things. You see the problem here? That's not exactly, I don't think of that as a Superman moment, really, because he failed at what he was trying to do. He saved a woman, but still ultimately failed in what he was trying to do. It would feel more like one if he did truly lift the building, but he just rises from the dust. And then, just on top of the writing being bad, I do think potentially the online war between Snyder Bros and Gun Bros very well could have scared away some general audience members. I think it probably didn't have that much of an effect, but it definitely could have had an effect. And all of that's quite funny because I think this Superman movie is either worse or at the very best just as bad as Man of Steel, two movies that are just not that great in the grand scheme of things, and these people are like ready to go to war with one another over these mediocre bad movies. It may not have actually scared the general audience member away, but when you get viciously attacked if you voice anything other than unbridled praise for Superman, your general audience members maybe just gonna want to not interact with that movie that much. Now, there is a lot that I like about Superman. I love the casting. I love the comic book feel to some of it. It's always great to see him back in the red trunks. That's my main criticism with Man of Steel on top of the bad writing. But James Gunn's over self-insertion into the marketing and even some of the writing elements of this movie, the bad writing he had is what led to one of the most popular characters in all of media not even hitting $700 million at the box office. Fans went and saw it. They saw the bad writing and confusion. They were overstimulated with the TikTok brain, told their friends to go see it. Their friends watched it, and so that movie was poorly written. I'm not going to go back and watch it again. They watched it once. They were satisfied. People had to go back to watch it to get to $600 million. People were not consistently going back to watch it. Your Superman fans, your James Gunn fans, they were ones coming back to watch it. The general audience member had no interest in coming back to rewatch it. That's why the movie stagnated at $600 million. At the end of the day, that's just what happened. One of the most popular characters in all of fiction failed to beat a generic sports movie about racing cars and Dinosaur 7. The last superhero movie we got this year was the biggest performer for Marvel, but somehow I think also probably the one that was most forgotten this year, which was Fantastic Four. I do think Fantastic Four is probably the best superhero film released this year. Bar's super low, so that's not saying much, but I think it's got the most coherent writing through most of it, but it still does have its flaws, don't get me wrong. This is where I think superhero fatigue was starting to set in a bit more. The first act of Fantastic Four is great. It's incredibly well done. The second act, major problems in it, but once you get past those major problems, it's still decent enough. Third act sucks. The third act is a disaster. And so when the movie gets worse as it goes on, it's not going to perform well. And you're going to leave with a bad taste in your mouth, whereas you had a decent taste in your mouth when you started. So that's going to definitely prevent you from going back to watch it. If a movie starts awful but ends amazing, someone might come back and watch it because their last memory was good. Your last memory of Fantastic Four is not good. I think part of what hindered Fantastic Four is people being sick of Pedro Pascal showing up in every single movie that was releasing at this point. He was in Eddington. He was in a different movie that I don't even remember the name of. He was in 3 other movies, and he was in The Last of Us. Like, this dude was all over the place. I think people got a little sick of it. Not to mention he doesn't really look like Reed Richards that much. I think he was all right in this movie. He was very flat. Didn't do any great acting. There was 1 or 2 scenes where he was really good, but he was the weakest main member of the cast for sure. And then maybe it didn't affect it. To me, it affected it. I don't know. The female Silver Surfer thing definitely scared some people away. I don't know that it had as big of an effect as I feel like it could have, but I think taking a character that some people really love, I like the Silver Surfer, I think he's very cool, and just making a gender change like that is going to hinder your movie in some way. Maybe it wasn't as big of an effect as I'm acting like it is, but to me, it just put a bad taste in my mouth from the start. And I still think it was probably my favorite superhero movie of the year. It's the best written superhero movie of the year. The one thing that this movie has that no other superhero movie this year had was an actual directing style. It was a retro futuristic style, 60s feel, all of that. Whereas all the other movies just felt like generically shot films. Thunderbolts, people was like, it's an A24 style movie. No, it wasn't. It was a basic Marvel soundstage movie. Superman was a mess movie. The only style Superman had was awful. And Brave New World was the strangest compilation of editing shots that I've ever seen. So it had an actual style, which is the big plus that Fantastic Four had. If you're curious about all the flaws and all the other stuff, check out my video. I have one out there. It's one of my better videos, I think. I did a good job of breaking down some of the flaws without taking up too much time. But the main one I have is the third act of this movie. The fact that Fantastic Four is Marvel's first family, yet at the end of the day, to defeat Galactus, one of the most powerful beings in all of Marvel, you need just one member of the Fantastic Four to defeat him, and then Silver Surfer at the end. But it was literally just on Sue Storm to defeat him. Now, Sue Storm is the most powerful of the Fantastic Four, don't get me wrong. But it still would have been better if every member contributed. They kind of do, but at the end of the day, it was almost entirely just a solo Sue Storm moment at the end. And then it was also the weirdest plan ever. They were going to teleport the world, and then they were going to teleport Galactus, but they made sure to put warning signs to know where he should stop walking. Very weird plan. The third act really collapses once they get back from space, and it hurts the end of this movie a lot. On top of this being the last thing that released in this line of 2 horrible MCU movies and a Superman movie that people liked, but a lot of people also probably didn't like, considering they didn't go back and rewatch it most likely, led to Fantastic Four being the worst performer out of the big summer releases, with Superman F1, Dinosaur 7, and Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four was the least viewed one box office wise. That is where you're starting to get that superhero fatigue, I do think, that comes in. Bad writing led to it, and that is the culmination. Now, we won't really know, I think, if superhero fatigue is a real thing until we get a well-made superhero movie that just underperforms. Once we get that, I'm willing to say it. But for now, I'm going to stick with that. I think bad writing is what killed it. I think superhero fatigue can definitely tank these movies, but if they were well written, I still think people would go back and watch it. And at the end of the day, they just weren't. So, where do superhero movies go from here? The DCU, I think, is almost certainly heading for a massive flop next year with Supergirl, a movie that I think could be quite good, but they've spent so much money on it, and with Superman not getting above $600 million by that much, there's no way Supergirl's gonna have to struggle to get past $400 million, I would think. I weirdly have more faith that that movie could be good than pretty much anything else coming out next year, but at the end, maybe Clayface, but at the end of the day, I think it's gonna be a massive flop that the DCU is heading for. And movies only getting $400 million wouldn't be an issue if these studios weren't spending a insane amount on these movies as well as marketing. It just sets you up to lose money because if you don't break $1 billion, it just is what happens. That's what happened with Superman. Superman was made for an insane amount of money as well as a insane amount of marketing spending. You have to double that budget to get what your break-even point is. That's very rough math of doing it. There's a lot more nuance in it, but the theaters take a cut. That's the thing a lot of people love to forget when they're adding these movies box office compared to get the profit. That's how Superman lost money. That's how all the other ones lost money. So underperforming movies wouldn't be an issue if they weren't spending so much, but they just keep spending more and more and more. It's an infinite money gobbling machine. Marvel will likely see a box office bump next year. They'll have a Spider-Man movie and an Avengers movie. Those should break $1 billion. If they don't, we have a real problem on our hands at Marvel. But at the end of the day, I don't really have faith that those movies are going to be well written, even remotely. And not to mention after that, they really will have no more tricks up their sleeve. They can't throw out the Avengers card. They can't throw out the Spider-Man card. And then it's time for superhero movies to go on a break. That's my thought. I think superhero movies either need to stop or they just need to go back to trying to play to their core audience. Make cheap movies targeted at your core audience, and maybe at some point you can build them back up to the point they once were, but it'll never reach those heights again. While I don't think superhero fatigue was the main cause for movies failing this year, horrible writing, uncompelling characters, and horribly shot movies will lead to superhero fatigue quickly setting in. And heck, it may have already had. If superhero movies can return to that niche audience, that's your only hope at trying to build back up into something reasonable. But like I said, I don't see that happening. Thanks for watching.